there are two sides of the modern Republican universe right now. And we know the insane side. We know the Tea Party, we know the grift, and as Sam always says, it's sort of two sides of a brands competing for market share. I think that's true. But I also think that some of these guys are genuinely crazy. And a guy that we don't talk about enough, in my view, but I know Jimmy will be happy to hear us mentioning, although also angry when he hears
We're
this guy's
talking
name.
about our resident Maine listener,
Our maniac. I think we have some other Maine listeners.
Jimmy Reefer Cake.
Jimmy Reefer Cake, our Maine guy. And I should say, I have personal connection to Maine. I went to college up in Maine. I went to Bates up in Lewiston. So I've spent a lot of time in the great state of Maine, and I have a little bit of it bothers me that Governor Governor Paul LePage is literally, he might be the most insane governor in America, right in the state of Maine. He's absolutely insane, and we've chronicled any number of things that he has said about President Obama. He's compared, made all sorts of fascism and Nazi comparisons with the federal government. He's refused Medicaid expansion. I mean, he's one of those guys where he's not the host or the head who's scamming people. He could just as easily be on the other side of those iodine ads for Alex Jones. It just so happens that he is the governor of the friggin' state of Maine. And there's new news that came.
Just so happens.
It just so happens that he actually has some authority and some power, and he is absolutely demented. And there's new news that's come out. There's a guy named Mike Tipping, who's a blogger in Maine, and he has a new book out called As Maine Went, Governor Paul LePage and the Tea Party Takeover of Maine. And excerpts of this book were published over the past couple of days, some in Talking Points memo, I think also in the Bangor News, and other people are picking up on it. He's in a fundraiser. He's fundraising right now to complete this book. And one of the things that he broke was that Governor LePage actually had meetings, several meetings, with leaders of the sovereign citizens movement in Maine. Now, we know that the sovereign citizens movement has been implicated in killing law enforcement officials, in planning terrorist attacks, and there's no joke about these groups. This is the thinking that was involved in Timothy McVeigh's terrorism in Oklahoma. A guy was arrested in Alaska recently. Obviously, even if they weren't formally part of it, but the shooters in Las Vegas who went on that killing spree, that terrorism attack a couple of weeks ago, same kind of line of thinking. And there's a couple of guys in Maine who have a radio show called, I actually don't have it in front of me, the name of their program. I think it's the Aaron Stock Report, I believe. I'm going to have to come back to it. I actually don't have it in front of me. I apologize. But they have, the Aristock Watchman program.
Ooh,
yeah.
Can we get a say the name again and give me a little bit of the
Which one?
The dun dun dun.
The Aristock Watchman. And these guys in Maine, the Maine sovereign citizens, have all sorts of theories about 9/11. They say that Maine should have its own currency, which should obviously be gold-based. Anything that recognizes federal authority is a form of illegality, if not treason. And it just so happens that while most Mainers, or maniacs, have been ignoring these insane, demented people who are connected with the National Sovereign Citizens Movement, which has many affiliations with terrorism and has already caused many deaths, there is one person who's quite interested in what the Aristock Watchmen have to say, and that is the governor of Maine, Paul LePage, the most insane governor in America. And according to the
He really is.
he's
though.
an absolutely insane guy.
Like we're not even talking just like on like right wing, conservative crazy. I think he's like legit far end like conservative nut, worse than like Alex Jones, who's at least making tons of money off of it.
No, I'm telling you that the governor of Maine is the guy who's getting pitched the iodine supplements.
But yeah,
he's
he's buying Alex.
He's
what Alex
buying
Jones is selling.
the Alex Jones iodine supplements. He is absolutely insane. He actually is a little bit of a third category. There's the Tea Party scam, the Tea Party grift, the mainstream Republican grift. He is actually a guy who's talking to his television, and he's the governor. And according to a new book written by a Maine blogger called As Maine Went, as I mentioned, As Maine Went, Governor Paul LePage and the Tea Party Takeover of Maine, LePage held between 8 and 9 meetings with these representatives of the Maine sovereign citizens, the co-hosts of the Aroostook Watchman. And these guys shared many things with him. They shared, as an example, the fundamental illegality of the federal government. Maine should have its own currency, and it should be based on the gold standard. They also asked LePage to make changes in the Maine Criminal Code of Justice Academy Training Manual to remove a notation that the FBI considers them to be part of the domestic terrorist movement. I would imagine that would be a nice request to make to the governor. Hey, you know that whole part about our terrorism and stockpiling weapons and calling for death of federal officials and everything? Yeah, could you remove that, Governor? That'd be great. Thank you so much. These guys' names are Steve Martin and Jack McCarthy. And they, according to their own reporting on their great radio program, which I'm looking forward to listening to, they said that LePage listened and listened and listened. And LePage himself said, that was LePage. LePage says, I listened and listened and listened. Some points they were making were reasonable and some were off the wall. Now, what part was reasonable for Paul LePage? Was it the Maine should have its own gold currency? Was it talk about the FBI and treason? I mean, what on earth? Just the fact that you would listen and listen and listen to these people is astonishing. But the biggest thing that has come out of this reporting is that these guys, Martin and McCarthy, discussed state Democratic leaders and basically said they're guilty of treason. And in their mind, the sovereign citizens, the punishment for treason has not changed. And the punishment for treason is being hung.
Just a matter of fact.
Yeah, just a matter of fact. That's what you do. I never said that. But the governor said that. I never opened my mouth and said the word. This is McCarthy talking about hanging people for treason. He's just said they were guilty of treason. McCarthy, I never said it, but the governor said it. I had my mouth opened and said the word, explained McCarthy. The governor looked at us and looked at his buddy and said, they're talking about hanging them. So Governor LePage was right there on the hanging. So look, you have a governor here in a real actual state with real authority who is meeting with domestic terrorists. Could you imagine if Governor Deval Patrick in Massachusetts, in the neighboring state of Massachusetts, could you imagine if he took a meeting with a Maoist group at the local UMass Boston campus? Come on in. Why don't you bring your newspapers? Explain why we need a rural guerrilla insurgency starting in Western Mass. Oh, you're talking about taking the means of production. Oh, you guys are referring to a cultural revolution. I get it. We're going to have to kick all the professors at Harvard out of their rooms, strip them of their clothing, and beat them, and then go through, Copley and take everybody's homes. Oh, that's what they're talking about. Could you imagine the absolute meltdown that would happen? But on the right, first of all, there's no Democrats who are even remotely radical. Then on the right, you have someone who is that radical, who might literally be just off his lithium insane. And He's meeting with guys who aren't just talking nonsense like some Maoist college group, but literally are affiliated with a movement that has murdered police officers, planned terrorist attacks, and actively advocates for violence. It shows you what is the reality of the Republican Party and a significant chunk of the Republican Party. And it also shows you just the stunning media double standards. How is Fox going to handle this? Fox spent how many ages talking about a handful of guys dressed up like they were Black Panthers? And apparently white people across America were terrified. They were so afraid of these new Black Panthers in 2008 that they couldn't vote for John McCain. They probably were still having heart palpitations, which explains why Mitt Romney lost. They just weren't quite safe enough to go vote for Mitt Romney because of this Black Panther army. Meanwhile, it's four guys dressing like Eldridge Cleaver. Nobody cares. This is a frigging governor meeting with domestic terrorist affiliates and saying he listened and listened and listened. And they had some good ideas. Others were off the wall. He won't specify which, probably because he wants to hang the state Democratic leaders himself. So there you go, Maine. You're going to need to get this guy out of office, and you might need some people to literally help physically remove this guy, because I have no idea what he's capable of, and I have no idea some of the constituencies he's activated up there.